The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the extra applause tonight. I do appreciate the opportunity. As time goes, I'll be better at standing up and sitting down, and I'm sure we'll all get better at our respective jobs. I have to tell you, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here today and to respond to the speech from the throne, and I appreciate the attendance here. I know sometimes it can be riveting no matter who's speaking. I hope this is a little more riveting than some. It is actually my most significant speech in the legislature so far, and I think it's an important opportunity to talk about some things, as well as my plan, the plan of what the Wild Rose has and what the government has, and how we will have some opportunities to have some commonalities, and of course we will have some differences as time goes. And of course you know that, Mr. Speaker, as you've seen this go on for some period of time. But I will tell you one thing that I'm proud of, and I think all members in this House are proud of, and that we should remember that we have some similarities. One is that we've all been elected by the people of Alberta, notwithstanding different ridings and different jurisdictions and actually different peoples in essence. We have all been elected to this place, and we all have the respect and the ability to speak for the people that we represent, and all of us should be respected for that belief, because if we don't, we will find ourselves sometimes as a third party if we don't actually represent the people that we were elected by. Because as I said before, we are not here for ourselves, nor did we get here by ourselves, and we need to make sure that we remember that no matter how important we start to believe that we are. The other thing that we have in common is that we're all very proud to be from Alberta. We're very proud to be here, and we all have families. We all have loved ones, and we all love and are loved. I love Alberta, and I would like to say when I first came into my political sphere that nobody loved Alberta more than I did. But I know that's not true, because we all love Alberta as much as we possibly can, I would suggest. I would recommend, Mr. Speaker, through you, of course, that all of us remember that as we give our speeches and as we comment on other people's performance on those speeches and beliefs. But the Wild Rose and the NDP government have some different political philosophies, and I'm going to try to talk about different philosophies. And those philosophies, of course, are based on different experiences in the world and different things that we have all had experiences in, whether it be in Alberta or elsewhere. I would commend the NDP at this stage, though, for something. And that is that the NDP do believe in something. Now, they believe in something more than just staying in power, which I find refreshing. No disrespect to our third party here, but I found that for many years that party would do anything to stay in power. And I don't think that's a good source of options for the people of Alberta. And I think that's something that I'm hoping that will change. And I hope that the NDP will stick to their policies, primarily because I think Alberta is more associated with our policies. But whether or not that is true, we will find out in the next election. The truth is at this stage that we must respect those policies and have good policy debates and make sure that we don't fall into the trap of previous parties, and that is lack principles, because principles and ideas are all we actually can give to Albertans that they want, truly. And I think the NDP will govern from their principles, and I hope that they do. I hope they will also be honest, and no disrespect to the NDP as a party, but that has been a difficulty of some NDP governments in the past in other jurisdictions. So I hope that doesn't happen here, and I believe, based on the leadership that I've seen, it won't. Many of the things the NDP believes in comes from academic theories and works of intellectuals. Almost all of the things the Wild Rose believes in come from, in my opinion, real-world experience. And I say that with respect. From working, from sweating, from succeeding, and from failing. From trying and achieving, or trying and failing. We all learn something, as I'm sure I will learn in this place, from failing and succeeding, as you will. Wild Rose MLAs have real-world experience in productive things. Someone once said, the facts of life are conservative. I truly believe that. I know that free markets lead to prosperity. I've seen examples of that throughout the world. I know that freedom that we enjoy, leads to good government. I know that small government leads to innovation, and I know that nothing stifles innovation more than big government. I know and firmly believe that I can spend my money better than the government ever will be able to.
Hear, hear.
And I know that the overwhelming majority of Albertans believe the same thing. They believe in smaller governments. I know that a good government protects the vulnerable. And I think there's no greater measure of a people by seeing how they treated the vulnerable peoples of that society. I am conservative in principle. I believe in conservative principles, not those conservatives, the conservative principles of fiscal responsibility. But I promise you, there's nothing more important than a strong safety net, a strong social safety net for the people that can't protect themselves. We as a society cannot let people fall through the cracks, but we must also reject the nanny state that wants to control every aspect of other people's lives. And I hope that this government will do exactly that. I know that people working together in charities and not-for-profits can achieve so much more than an overzealous and bureaucratic government. I know this because I live this. I have worked in many charities, non-profits, as you will soon find out. But I know that innovation, creativity, and the human spirit is much better than a bureaucratic government that's large, wasteful, and doesn't get the job done. Good thing I have 90 minutes. We're going to have 30 minutes of applause. I hope you guys start soon. But through you, Mr. Speaker, of course. How did I come to believe these things and know these things? Well, it has a lot to do with who I am, how I've lived my life, and where I come from. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that today. I'm the youngest in a family of 11 children, and our family made the very smart decision to move to Fort McMurray. 1967, I was only 4 years old. Fort McMurray was an amazing place to grow up. I had a dog team. I would go down the main street of Franklin Avenue with my rifle slung over my shoulder at the ripe old age of 12 years old. I know it sounds a little bit astonishing today, but it was an incredible, incredible upbringing in life. Small town atmosphere that gave me the opportunity to try so many different things and to see boom and bust, but meet an amazing amount of people. The average age in Fort McMurray is much younger than most places in Alberta. But we have the opportunity to meet so many different people, and we don't have cliques. We don't have these little groups that form in older communities because we have such a young community. So everyone gets along pretty well, and that's what I like about Fort McMurray. Sure. I like the fact that people walk down the street and say hi to everyone, that they go out to a restaurant and they'll stop at a table and talk to everyone. I like the fact that it's a small town. I like the fact that there's 5 rivers that flow into the city center. That is probably one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Heard that before? Unlikely. But I've lived there 50 years. And I've lived in other countries, including Australia, including the United States, and I find no greater place than Fort McMurray as far as working, playing, and raising a family. It's a beautiful place. And I invite you, like the previous member did, to come to my hometown and to see exactly what it's like and why I find it so beautiful. If you get lucky enough, you might even get invited, like your house leader was, on a fishing trip on the Clearwater River with me. It's a beautiful place, and you can actually eat the fish. I attended Prairie Bible Institute, which is in Three Hills, Alberta, for high school. I don't know whose riding it's in, but I would say that it was an incredible upbringing because I learned how to milk cows, how to work on a farm, how to talk the talk, how to shoot gophers, and how to be a different kind of Albertan. And I enjoyed it very much. I did get into some trouble there. It was a Bible school. I went there for high school, but I did get in some trouble. I understand all good people get into trouble from time to time. I was also the captain of the hockey team, and I like to play a lot of sports, and I still do. After that, I went and got a Bachelor of Science degree in Portland, Oregon. I then attended and received a Master's in Business Administration in Finance and a law degree. During school, I had a variety of jobs, some interesting ones. I've worked as a log hand, a printer, a lawyer, a registered trapper, a heavy equipment operator, and many other jobs, including a politician. I don't tell a lot of people that because I get worried. But I had an incredible upbringing out of Fort McMurray, traveling to Australia for my law degree and my MBA. Traveling the world and understanding that there is more than just Fort McMurray, even though I kind of would have liked it to stay that way because I had such a great upbringing. Before I returned to Fort McMurray in 1991 after my law degree. I was the president of the student council of the university. I was also the editor of the newspaper. I've been very active in the community, in all communities that I've been involved with. I actually attended the University of Calgary to finish off an equivalency in Canadian law and began practicing in Fort McMurray for 10 years. I was a very busy litigator, and I had some businesses that I started during that period of time in Fort McMurray, bought some land and did some wonderful things. And you know, the thing about Fort McMurray that is so incredible, besides what I've told you already, is that Fort McMurray is a land of opportunity, just like Alberta is a land of opportunity for so many people in the world and in Canada. You can go to Fort McMurray with nothing, and in 10 years you can leave with as much money as you can possibly carry, and more. You can make a lot of money through hard work and determination, which many people go to Fort McMurray for but don't stay. Most people go there for opportunity, and that opportunity leads to usually a good family, an incredible lifestyle, and a great quality of life for years to come. Hear, hear. Now, I did want to tell you a little bit and have the opportunity to tell people of the public what I have done for nonprofits. I was the chair of the Children's Health Foundation of Northern Alberta. I did that for 6 years, raising money for hospitals for sick children. I was the director of the Alberta Summer Games, director of the Chamber of Commerce, president of the Downtown Business Association, and other business organizations. I volunteered my time at Keano College, quantitative methods and statistics and business law. So I had an opportunity to give back to my community, and I continue to do that, and that's how I feel I'm here today to do. I think much the same as everyone else feels. Now, I did talk a little bit about Fort McMurray and opportunity and prosperity. But I will tell you this, that when you move to Northern Alberta, whether it be in Slave Lake or High Prairie or Athabasca or Lac La Biche or these small rural communities, Fort McMurray, you will find a vibrant community of people that actually love to be there. Now, you've heard some bad things about Fort McMurray. I have. Those people are usually the people that work at the work camps, that are from different areas, that are unhappy because they fly in and fly out. Anyone would be unhappy flying into a camp with 3,000 other people working at the same place you are 12 hours a day and then flying out to go home because you miss your family. Everyone wants to be near their family. So when you knock Fort McMurray or have opportunities to hear other people do it, remember, they are not people that actually call it home. I am a person that calls it home, and I'm very proud of it. Now, Fort McMurray is also about energy, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but I will tell you, further on in my career after practicing for 10 years in Fort McMurray, I ran for the Federal Conservative Party of Canada in a nomination, and there's sympathy from the other side, I know, but I'm very proud of that. I was very proud to run for Stephen Harper, and I was honored to be elected with 60% of the vote. The first time, 65% the second time, 68% the third time, and 72% the last time. Now, I didn't do quite as well the last election, but the people of Northern Alberta liked what I offered and liked what Stephen Harper had to offer and re-elected me with a clear majority each and every time. I believe that I made a significant difference in Stephen Harper's government, and I believe that Stephen Harper's government made significant positive differences. It was a government that reduced Canadians' tax burden. Clearly, 12 days of tax freedom that wasn't there when we got there in 2006. It reprioritized government. It respected provincial jurisdiction, something that hadn't happened before in quite a while. It improved our standing in the world. It kept us safe. And to commemorate that statement, this is the 30th anniversary of the Air India bombing, the largest ever terrorist attack against Canada. My heart still goes out to those people that were affected by that tremendous tragedy. A government that made me proud to be Canadian, that invested in our infrastructure, $47 billion over 8 years, the largest infrastructure investment in the history of Canada. A government that protected the vulnerable. And yesterday, we talked about the residential school apology. I was there when the Prime Minister correctly and courageously made that apology. It was right to come from the federal government, and he made that apology. Stephen Harper made that apology, not a Liberal Prime Minister, not any previous Prime Minister, but Stephen Harper, and I was very proud of him. I'm very proud of my time in Ottawa for a number of reasons, and I won't get into them because we will be asleep for a long time before that. I fought for some big ideas. I fought for decentralization, for limited taxation. I fought for a lot of things, passed about 25 bills on committees that I was part of. I was a parliamentary secretary for transport and infrastructure for 6 years, and I enjoyed that portfolio very much. But as all of you will know, if you ever have the opportunity to go to Ottawa, it's a long trip. And from Fort McMurray, it would be anywhere from 7 to 10 hours of flight twice a weekend. That's travel time, and it becomes exhausting. And I was missing my family. I had a young family. So I decided to stay and come home. I didn't want to stay in Ottawa. I'd never actually been in the House of Commons before I was elected. I was actually never in this House before I was elected. I'm not in politics to be a politician. I'm in politics to make Albertans, Canadians' lives better. And you know, when I decided to go to Ottawa, I decided to go to Ottawa because things were bad there. People were stealing our money, and it's our money, all of us here and all citizens of Canada. And they were taking that money and using it for political purposes, to put in their own pockets, and to change the course of history and the elections without the democracy that we all have so much respect for. And that's why I went to Ottawa, because under the Liberals, the things that were happening there were exactly the same, in my opinion, as the things that drove me to run against the PCs in the last election. I saw the identical issues with the provincial government that I saw with Ottawa in the Liberal government 10 years before. They weren't listening to the people, whether it be Willow Square in Fort McMurray, or just about any decision that the people actually spoke up for. They would do the opposite, or they thought they knew better. It was the same attitude that I saw back in the 90s with another government that thought they knew better and that started the reform movement. And I say to this government, and I say to all people in this House, don't forget who put you here, because they can just as easily get rid of you. Entitlement, overspending, cronyism, a government that believed in nothing except staying in power will have no priorities, and people will not keep them in power. And then, of course, there is healthcare. Healthcare drove me to this, almost 50% of our budget. We do have wonderful, dedicated frontline workers, but we have a system that just simply does not work. It is not good enough for Albertans. We spend more on healthcare than anybody else in Canada per capita, and we get bottom of the pack results. I put to you as the government, please fix healthcare. Concentrate on healthcare. It is not just a disaster, but it is part of taking away our loved ones if it's done wrong. So, I did get back into politics for the same reasons I was driven to politics federally. I ran for the leadership of the Wild Rose because the Wild Rose believes Albertans need a better government. Wild Rose believes Albertans need true democratic reform, and my compliments on Bill 1. Wild Rose believes Albertans need transparencies, not secret deals, secret laws, secret regulations that contradict what politicians actually say out loud. It's time to do what you say and say what you do. Wild Rose believes Albertans need efficient ministries, not cronyism and sole source contracts. Wild Rose believes Albertans need this government to get down to the business of actually fixing the healthcare system and seniors' care. I challenge you all for that. But most of all, Wild Rose believes Albertans need a government truly committed to fiscal responsibility. I mentioned healthcare is the most expensive in Canada per capita and gets bottom of the pack results. Well, we have the most expensive government in Canada, and we get bottom of the pack results. And I say this to you, Mr. Speaker, not because you can fix it all by yourself, but because you might be able to carry the message on to others. It's not our money. We need to be truly committed to fiscal responsibility and prudence in our management styles. to make sure that what we do is right for future generations. And when I say future generations, I mean our children, our grandchildren. We do not want them to carry the debt of our stupidity. We want them to have a better quality of life than we have. And that's why we need to focus on fiscal prudence in the future, right now, starting today, and moving on for the next 4 years. And the next 4 years after that, the government can do better and needs to do better. Albertans do deserve to have the best quality of life in the world. But when your third largest line item is debt financing, it means you cannot have that money to do other things with because you borrowed it. And I say to you all, please do not borrow any more money. Albertans are smart, and they can spend their money much better than we can. And they will get the dollars to where it's supposed to go for them and their priorities, instead of us and our priorities. Every time we decide to make a spending decision for them as a government, that decision costs money to implement, to announce, to roll out. The money is better left with them. During the election, Wildrose campaigned of 5 priorities. And I'd like to compare those priorities to the throne speech. The first priority, of course, was standing up for low taxes, balanced budgets, and a long-term saving strategy. Our plan would have balanced the budget by 2017 without raising taxes. We would have done this with actual reductions in spending, not draconian reductions, but actual small reductions in spending across government, cutting PC waste, and at the whole time, protecting 100% of our frontline services. Our plan actually included a long-term saving strategy and investing back into the Heritage Fund. Now, what bothered me about this, the first thing that bothered me about the throne speech was that it was very thin. The second thing was that it didn't have anything, not one mention of fiscal responsibility. This government, at this stage, has no plan for getting our spending in line with our revenue levels. Now, we've heard that oil is low. That's because we heard it from the previous government. Well, oil prices are not low, folks. We are the 3rd highest revenue year that this government has ever seen. The 3rd best sales of this corporation's, this government's business ever. Any business would be proud to have the 3rd highest sales in its history to deal with as far as expenses. So it's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. That's right. And this government has no plan for savings. All indications is that this government will spend every dollar of the future legacy that is our resource wealth. When it is gone, what do we do then for jobs? We hear diversifying our economy, but we see very little action, and bluntly, no action from the previous government. We must go away from the path of PC debt, PC entitlement, and PC cronyism, and move to a new era of what's best for Albertans. Every indication so far is that this government is committed to growing the bureaucracy and to growing government. I say to you, think differently. Compare yourself to the rest of the country and what they do with the same amount of or less of resources. Not once in the throne speech is there any mention of economizing. Already we have seen this NDP government resume a hiring boom and cancel the wage freeze to the senior managers in the civil service. I went to a chiropractor just the other day, a couple blocks from here, and he told me that he couldn't believe how many jobs were being advertised at AHS, 6-figure incomes. And he was thinking of leaving private practice to go to Alberta Health Services. What scares me the most is how much money we don't have to spend, how big the bureaucracy is, and how much we're spending on the bureaucracy now in inefficiencies, middle managers, upper managers. It is not serving Albertans. It is pushing paper from one end of the desk to the other, and that doesn't actually cure patients. When it comes to fiscal issues, I promise Albertans, Wildrose promises Albertans, that we will fight the NDP government's fiscal folly. We are hoping they will see the light. Our second priority was standing up for patient-centered health and seniors care, both of which are very important to Canadians. We have about 1 million new Canadians that become seniors every year. We have 65,000 to 70,000 people in Alberta that become seniors every year. We cannot ignore this issue any longer. While we do want to reform the health system and guarantee Albertans that their wait times would be medically reasonable, unfortunately, we were not elected with a majority to do that. A wait time guarantee would have put an end to excruciating and dangerous wait times Albertans face across the province. I would suggest that would be a very good start on healthcare. We also wanted to have a mental health and addiction strategy. We believe that healthcare is about patients cured, not about dollars spent and managers hired. Healthcare is not about the system or the procedure. It is about the patient and about curing. This throne speech has no mention, none at all, of how this government will fix healthcare. This is the #1 priority for many Albertans, but the government's only plan seems to be to employ as many pencil pushers as possible. That is not reasonable, and that is not what Albertans need. Our third priority was standing up for world-class education system. 15 years ago, we were #1 in the world. #1 in Alberta. Today, we're #5 in Canada. That is not reasonable. We need to concentrate on an education system that builds schools both on time and on budget. How many did the PCs build? 1 school. How many did they promise? 123. How many times did they promise them? 240. Let's try business different this time. Our plan focused squarely on parents. We wanted to eliminate mandatory school fees for parents. We wanted to protect their right to choose what's best for their children's education, for parents. Parents across Alberta have told us that it was time to get back to basics. Wild Rose MLAs will fight to develop consistent provincial grading standards with traditional letter or percentage grades for students from grades 5 to 12. We've heard clearly that this would be an important first step for education in this province and to restore education to where it was and where we all want it to be. And that is. This throne speech has no mention at all of how this government will give Albertans the top quality education system that we did have. Not one mention in the throne speech. All we know is that the government is prepared to throw money at the system. They claim that they are investing $103 million in the system, but if you have a calculator and add it, it actually comes up to $213 million. They claim that it is to fund 12,000 new students, except that if you look on the website, the school boards have indicated that they only anticipate 7,500 new students. The throne speech does not mention curricula. The throne speech is very weak on education. Our fourth priority focused on democracy and accountability. We had a series of reforms to Cabinet and to how MLAs should work. We would limit severance packages across all government, not just among political staff. We wanted to keep politicians accountable, and we wanted MLA recall legislation, true fixed election dates, and, you might guess this, a ban on floor crossing without a by-election. Now, you might say, why? Well, I will tell you why. I believe, clearly, Mr. Speaker, that I believe the floor crossing was an attack on our reputation as politicians. It wasn't an attack on the Wild Rose or the PCs or the NDP. It was an attack on all of us, and democracy should not be attacked like that again. This throne speech has some elements of progress on this particular front, and I would like to compliment the House Leader and the Premier. Yesterday we passed Bill 1, which almost gets rid of union and corporate donations. Pretty exciting. We campaigned on it, the NDP campaigned on it. Good opportunity. But I do say almost because the bill leaves in two huge loopholes. unions can still guarantee loans to the NDP, like they have done in the past, and unions can donate paid time of their employees to the NDP, like they have in the past. Two loopholes that clearly the NDP knew existed, and yet they did nothing to close. We thought we'd seen the end of governments that were opportunist and changed the playing field to their advantage. We're hoping that that loophole can be changed. The law in Alberta defines contributions as cash, goods, or real property. I'm pretty sure the Premier doesn't think that union and corporate employees are goods or property, so I think this gives us a tremendous opportunity to slam the door shut on those two loopholes. It's not a fair playing ground, and we need to be fair so Albertans know that we believe in democracy for all parties, not just for the NDP. But there is hope we can fix it. The Premier has invited all parties to sit on a special committee to deal with these sorts of issues. We're hoping that the members from the government on that committee will be open to amendments and open to close these loopholes. Of course, I look to the House Leader in particular to give directions on that front. It's a good thing. I do commend the Premier for that effort, and I'm hoping that we will see better legislation in the fall. Our fifth priority was standing up for Alberta communities, for healthy communities, for vibrant communities, to make sure that people want to live in Alberta communities, both rural communities and urban communities. Our rural communities and urban communities are tied together. It is not an exclusive, mutually exclusive situation. They are dependent and codependent on each other. And why do I say that? Because the urban areas do not hold the natural resources or the people that work on most of these natural resources. The rural areas hold that. But the same is reverse. When people in Fort McMurray want to have a nice weekend out, they go to Edmonton, and that's where they spend a lot of their money, or Calgary, to watch a Flames game. There is a connection, and we're very proud of Edmonton and Calgary living in the rural area. The same as I believe urbanites should be proud of the rural areas in Alberta. Our urban communities need funding certainty. We heard that clearly from the mayors. For too long, politics has been the key determinant of funding. That has to stop. We proposed the 10-10 municipal funding plan to solve this problem, to take politics out of infrastructure funding. We would give this funding to municipalities with no strings attached, with no political strings attached. The throne speech is very weak on community issues as well. It really fails to understand resource issues entirely. It fails to mention agriculture, one of the most important things that actually built this province and that keeps food in our mouths. What about tourism? Other key economic drivers in so many communities that have been left out entirely from the throne speech. Not one mention. The government's policy on energy issues are also particularly concerning, and to suggest otherwise, nobody's listening. People in Alberta are worried. Communities are worried. Corporations and businesses are worried. As the MLA for Fort McMurray-Conklin, I know how important our energy sector is. When I moved to Fort McMurray in 1967, there was 1,500 people there. Today, there's over 100,000 that live in that area, and there's another 70,000 that worked in the work camps, which means probably about 110,000 people worked in the work camps because they hot swapped the beds. I know how important the energy issue is to us because I saw these people every week flying back and forth to Toronto, to Newfoundland, to BC, when I would fly to Ottawa. The planes were full, and there's 3 direct flights a day to Toronto and points beyond. The economy of Canada rests with our energy industry here in Alberta. People wonder why Alberta has such a big influence on the world stage. There's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is oil and gas industry, and the success we have with patents, with ingenuity, with the people, the men and women that work in these industries that go around the world and bring their resource specialties into the world and bring Canadian jobs and investment into the world. What does that do? Well, when you come from Alberta, which is the most generous place in Canada per capita, and Fort McMurray, which is the most generous place in Alberta and Canada per capita for all nonprofits, including the United Way and other groups, we have the ability to influence not just Canada, but the world with our decisions. That's why every decision that is made by your government is so critical to not just us in this place, not just Edmontonians and Calgarians, and not just the people in rural Alberta, but to all Canadians, to the entire world. We are an example of what can be done with a proper democracy. We have struggled in the opposition to get the government to acknowledge the importance of our energy sector and our need to get more pipelines to get our product to market. And as all of you know in this place, the Wild Rose is here to help. The throne speech is also weak on communities. Our cities and other municipalities will still have to go cap in hand to the government for their funding, and they will have to play political games to get their projects built. The most popular infrastructure program in Ottawa was the gas tax fund. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities gave rave reviews on it. Why? Because it was certain, it was based on population. It was indexed, so it would grow with the rate of inflation. And it was fair. It didn't take myself or someone else to make decisions on where the money would go. It would go to the communities based on their need and their population. It's a fair system, and that's the system that our 10-10 program suggests, very similar. And I would recommend that particular infrastructure investment project to be adopted by the NDP. It's a great platform, and we'd be happy to help to go over it in more particulars. Overall, as you can tell, I'm not thrilled with the throne speech. I thought it was very thin. Really, it is a speech about how the government will return in the fall to give a speech to the throne. So it was a speech about a speech. That is very concerning. Albertans have gone months without a budget and a government, and we have a time in our lives right now that is very unpredictable. The economy of the world is faltering. And we need to make sure that the corporate community, the business community, Alberta families have certainty in their decisions. And in my mind, that means when we have an election, we come to the people with a clear, laid out plan of where the priorities of the government are so they can feel confident and focused in the future. As I mentioned, the throne speech fails to mention agriculture or forestry or tourism, which are all very big industries and need assurances. All of those industries need assurances that this government hasn't forgotten them. The throne speech has no plan for healthcare. It has no plan for restoring Alberta to world-class education. It has no plan on dealing with our communities. It does have some elements that deal with improving democracy in Alberta, but much remains to be done about accountability. And now, some on this side of the House would question this particular act based upon the two loopholes that allow the NDP to have employees working for them from unions or to allow loans. Those are troubling issues. And the throne speech really has no plan about fiscal issues except to raise taxes. And you might have heard, the Wild Rose is not in favor of raising taxes. Not just raising taxes, but spending the money faster than they can tax it. That's something new for the NDP. Albertans are worried about their jobs, and they want the government to be predictable. They want the government to promote long-term stability, and this throne speech does not do that. It does none of that. I think that it would have been helpful for Alberta businesses and Alberta families to get a clearer picture of this government's priorities, especially given the economic situation that's just come about in the last few months. And that economic situation is not enough revenue. That economic situation was brought about as a result of those folks over there that spent faster than it came in, and they had no plan to do so. They threw it around like it was their money. It is not their money. Getting that clarity from the government as far as a focus on the future would have been very helpful. And it would be helpful now, because we see in our marketplace, we see in the economy, the uncertainty is causing difficulties with businesses. People are deferring funding and investment decisions in Alberta. And you can say that's not happening, but it is. People are worried. And a clear roadmap is the best thing to do before you get in a car and take any trip. And we have no map. All we can do now is hope that the government goes away for the summer, and as the House Leader said, as the Minister of Infrastructure said, work hard over the summer to come up with a plan, to come up with a strategy that identifies what Albertans want as their priorities. We can hope that it will take the time, that it will listen to Alberta families, listen to communities, listen to Alberta businesses. We can hope that such consultation will result in a stable and mainstream throne speech in the fall, or the winter, as the case may be, or next year, as the case possibly might even be even further. I hope we get to vote on it before the end of the year, but we'll see. A new budget and throne speech that actually deals with the priorities that matter to Albertans, and not just the ideological hobby horses which matter to this government's partisans. I think there's nothing clearer than to make sure that we all represent Albertans with hard work, with honesty and perseverance, recognizing that we are here but for a very short time, and to move this mountain called government one way or the other is difficult, even with the largest majority. But to make things better only takes one step in the right direction. So please, Mr. Speaker, through you, when you and everyone else takes the step, might they please take the step towards fiscal responsibility, prudence, and understanding that the money does not belong to the government. It belongs to the people of Alberta.
Here. 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 Here.